We should probably explain a little bit about what this is. I'm Jason, and this is Ryan, and we are on the advocacy team at Datadog and have recently had some conversations around best ways for us to both stay on top of the very rapidly changing AI space, which is part of what we do for work, but also help educate those around us within advocacy, within just engineering at Datadog, but maybe even in broader sense, just helping developers at large on what we discover and what we learn about some of these AI tools as we go through them, and take time to share that out with everybody instead of hoarding that information. I think
Mhm.
Ryan and I both agree it's really important for people to educate themselves on a lot of these things, not just to find out how they can help you in your day-to-day job, but also make sure we're keeping everybody safe and doing the right
Agreed.
thing.
And people ask me questions about this stuff all the time. I feel like I've missed something if I haven't heard about the tool they're talking about. There's always surprises for me, at least.
Yeah, every morning I spend time watching videos on YouTube and trying to just make sure I'm plugged in. And then I take a note of like an app or
Oh,
a new service that I've heard of. And then that goes into my list of things I want to eventually go make time to check out.
this is that time.
Intentionality of, okay, I'm going to set aside some time. I'm going to go through this list of tools and actually get my hands on keyboards and play with them so that I can form my own opinion and then help other people understand what they are. So actually, I've got a list here I'll switch over to my
Yeah, let's do
screen
it.
because Ryan and I have separate lists that we're going to merge into this repo, which is just on github.com. If you go to my GitHub and then AI tools experiments, we'll update this with both of our stuff, but I've started putting in just a few things that I've heard about and I've started categorizing a lot of them.
Right.
Some of them are just AI, I'll say adjacent, whereas some of the automation tools that I've played with or have heard about that I want to go play with, they aren't AI tools by themselves, but they plug in and play well with others and the agents. The agentic model of AI and LLMs and all that kind of stuff is where they're excelling right now.
Mhm.
So, long story short, we've got a great list of tools that we want to go play with. Ryan's got his. We're going to
Yep.
go over Ryan, his first tool today. You want to share anything else or just dive into the tool that you've picked out?
The long and the short of it is I've been working on, I guess you would call them image generation models. So multimodal in that you will typically give them text and the model will give you back an image. I've been working that in reverse in terms of I will give them an image and expect text back. Be it something like, imagine you're trying to go through your Lightroom catalog and put those into categories. Maybe they're by color, or maybe it's like style. Perhaps it's like landscapes, or you've got pictures of your family, that kind of stuff. And doing this manually can take a while. I've been trying to think about ways I can use this to give me a leg up on my photo processing stuff. Now, what I did notice is a lot of the GUIs I was working with were built with something called Gradio. It would say on the bottom, UI developed and brought to you by Gradio. And I was thinking, this is pretty handy. A lot of this code, like the code that I'm working with, these code bases are in Python, which I can typically muddle my way through. It's not too bad. I know a little bit about Python, so I can typically follow along. Where I get lost, though, is on the front end. And I've tried to make my own. I've been playing around a lot with Bun and Hono to do this kind of stuff. Can I quickly, rapidly make a text box that has an input, output, that kind of thing? And then I realized, hey, maybe I should actually try Gradio, like all the other cool kids are using. What are they actually doing here? Now, Gradio, they say, will help you build and share delightful machine learning apps. I'm going to put a finer pin on this, and that if the GUI that you're trying to build has something like an input field, and then it's got like a submit response kind of thing and expects text or an image or something to go somewhere, this GUI might be perfect for that kind of thing. Now you can see there's radio buttons and sliders and stuff like that you can use. But the nice thing is it's just a library that you can actually install pretty quickly. So if we were to swip this to the side, the installation is something as, I'll make this a little bit bigger, my apologies, as a pip install, which actually makes it quite simple. Now, there's one caveat here in that if you're using system Python, you'll probably want to install this in a virtual environment, which is what I've done here. So to install in the virtual environment, we create a virtual environment. We called it Gradio env. And then to source it, all I did was type source Gradio bin activate. And then within there, just a pip install Gradio. We'll actually get the package for you. Now, you can see in this case, it's already been satisfied because I've already installed it. But one way to test that it's been installed is to type in Python, or in my case, Python 3. And then what we can actually do is, if we go through this quick start here, we can start importing Gradio. So if we do this import Gradio as GR, which I'm going to do. And it's just in the Python REPL. I think this is what I want. So from Gradio, what I want to get is the version. And if it's installed properly, this should return the version number. It does. I had 5.16 installed. I've just gone up to 5.18. Sorry, 5.17. I'm just going to exit here. So what we're going to do is create a first app. Jason, have you dealt with HuggingFace before? Are you familiar with HuggingFace? Okay.
HuggingFace is great.
And what I noticed is part of this Gradio, the promise, I guess, is to be able to do things like take spaces like this that you might see in Hugging Space and deploy them locally, which is actually pretty interesting to me. Not only because I could have them on one computer in my household that's got like a graphics card on it or what have you, but also because I could share them to people outside of my own computer. So if I got something running that I thought was pretty cool, I might be able to send Jason a link and see if he can play around with it. So in that vein, I guess, what we're going to do is grab one of these spaces here and create a quick sample page and see if we can't share it to Jason. Now, what I noticed in this launch here is that there's actually a share equals true parameter that will allow us to share it around. And I noticed this in troubleshooting it. It actually said, hey, if you want this GUI to be shared amongst multiple people and multiple computers, all you need to do is just change this at the bottom, which is pretty cool. So when you first launch it, it will give you that tip. What we're going to do is copy this code. And you can see that it's pointing to this question answering space. So if we go into here, and we change the space. So we were looking at the diff text space. And what I'm going to do is just change it to this so we can see a preview of what we're trying to launch locally. So something like this. Now I've got this in dark mode. Of course, it could be in light mode as well. But we're going to try to launch this locally using this here. So I'm going to grab this code and pop onto a Python file. I've made one already, but basically we just go into here, delete all this out. Paste this in, and then I think all I need to do in here is share equals uppercase true, and I believe this is it. This is my understanding. So Python 3, we'll do main.py, and when this runs, it should tell me that it's running locally, which is pretty handy, but also it's running on this public URL, which is pretty interesting. So Jason, I'm going to pop this into my browser here, but also in the chat on our end. I'm going to send you a link and see if that works for you. You can see on my end, it did load. So it loaded that public URL for my internal web server. And that didn't take very long. I don't know, 5 minutes, that kind of thing, which is pretty impressive, actually. For me to do this in something like Bannerhono would probably take me, I don't know, half an hour. I'm not that great with JavaScript, but it takes me a little bit of time to get my head around front end stuff.
Yeah, I feel like most times I have a use case for that where I need a front end. I'm definitely turning to ChatGPT, Copilot, something that just hey, give me some quick HTML, JavaScript, and CSS to just basically capture something and then do something else with it. But now, and there's other tools out there too that help make interfaces just like a simple interface. But this is pretty cool.
Hey, so, and yours in light mode, so we know it's different.
Yeah.
There we go. Now, if you hit submit, does that actually work? Oh, very interesting. Not bad. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So we give it some text, we give it a question, and give us an answer. But this is just one of the spaces that we were looking at in HuggingFace.
HuggingFace.
We can
Which
use
is great.
many.
Yeah, I feel like to describe HuggingFace, I think HuggingFace is going to turn into a really great source for a lot of the tools that we'll probably play with, or another ones I want to play with. Every time I go in there and browse around, there's all kinds of stuff. It's like a marketplace.
It feels like that, doesn't it? Yeah, there's leaderboards and some challenges and things like that. So you can upload your own models as well and see how they fare in like a fight against a whole bunch of other ones. What I find interesting is some of the way that they rate models is it's like double blind. So you won't know what you're rating. And the other person won't know either, but you're just rating what you thought of the response. And as a result, maybe not double blind, maybe blind is what I'm looking for, but you're not aware of what you're rating for the rankings, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah.
That way it's not like your emotions are involved, I guess is what I was looking for.
If you go into HuggingFace and just grab a completely different, what they're called, space.
Yep.
And inside the code, just replace that one little line of text in the Python with this other space, you'll get a completely different interface.
I think you might be right. Let's find it. So Gradio is who we want. Let's go back here. So this is from Gradio. Let's click into there.
But even if you go into just HuggingFace, I think /spaces, right? The group of spaces are.
Oh, my apologies. Let's try this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so if we look for something, let's look for image generation. FlexDev. Okay, this is pretty good. and it's running on 0. So you're saying you think that I can just grab this?
Well, this is how I understood, which I think to me is like the big selling point.
I hear you. And I'd actually only been using the Gradio spaces. I hadn't thought of what I could do if I did it this way. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Now, again, I'm going to use this just because I'm running this on a Linux box that is, in fact, under my desk. But let's hit this live one here.
Mandolin.
Okay. I think this should be fine. So all I did was type in, my apologies, the prompt is pretty small here, but someone playing mandolin in a field. And this is using that URL that I've exposed publicly. So if you're watching this recording within 72 hours, perhaps you could hit it too. It is starting up now. It is pretty slow. Now, what we're using is Flux One Pro. I've used Dev before. It's actually a pretty good model for generating images. I've not used Pro, but I've heard it's quite good.
Okay.
Who does it? And think of it as kind of like a Mid-Journey. Oh, wow. What I typed in someone on purpose just to see what it would be here. This is
Okay.
Now, listen, I'm not an expert, but is that the right amount of pins? I have 8 strings.
I have 8 strings.
No, I can't count 8 strings.
Here's more of a guitar. Okay, looks like they're playing it with their fingers, which not typically.
The hands look all right.
So the left hand, the index fingers,
does look a little. Yeah, maybe I'm playing too much.
not
Man.
big thumb too. Really.
It's a very long thumb. In
Okay.
terms of sharing something, though, I will say this is pretty fast.
An app basically that
In
is
the
an
past,
interface into Flux.
Yeah, in the past, I probably used Bootstrap, if we're being serious here. Tailwind, just basically other tools that can help me get to a point that I like. And in fact, if it was just a form and response kind of thing, I'd probably can that and use it for everything. I'd use the same app for all the stuff. I wouldn't change it. Boilerplate, go through it. So the fact that somebody's done that part for me already is actually pretty interesting. So I don't have to do that myself.
Can we inspect the code for one of these apps? I'd
We
love to
sure
see
can.
what it looks like behind the scenes, because
Yeah,
in
so-
terms of instrumenting it,
Mhm.
that's where my next thought
Sure.
goes.
Sure. So I got a hint of Vite, at least when I was looking through the code, but I think that's just for is it bundling for JS? Okay, but I'll quickly go through the code here. What do we start with? There's a viewport, bunch of text. I'm just looking for anything that sticks out. Not seeing any frameworks just yet or anything like that. It does have Google Analytics turned on, which is interesting. Or Analytics anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Which I probably want to do that too. It says they're Gradio Analytics. Okay, we're scrolling down a bit. Interesting. So I think what I'm noticing in here is that there's other properties that I'm not using, like streamable, for example. Instead of waiting for your text, you could have it stream through. A lot of this is just setting up the boilerplate and just skipping through here to see if I see anything that sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this is just JSON setting up the boilerplate template. It's using Google Fonts, something called iframe resizer. Yeah, and this is maybe doing the heavy lifting right here.
Mm-hmm.
Is this JavaScript?
You looked at if you could do a diff between this scene and the other scene.
Oh,
What's actually being changed each time?
my assumption is that the JSON payload would change for sure, like telling you how it
Well,
sets
yeah.
up the form.
All the fields.
So
names
this
and all.
here would change. But I feel like the rest of this is probably boilerplate. The rest of this stuff seems like it's
Mhm.
just standard. This is our image. It came through as a WebP, which is cool. This is our iframe resizer. This is probably our font. It is. Here's our Gradio. Not seeing anything obvious in here. Okay. So there's quite a few things that we could have used. There's an accordion. There's a slider. Single page. Okay, so there's a bunch of little components here as well that looking at this now tells me I could have used. Okay, there's nothing else in here, I don't think.
You could probably instrument this thing with at least
Yeah, in fact, there's stuff in here that okay, so it's svelte. Here we go.
svelte.
So it's svelte, and I wonder if it's svelte kit. Okay, very cool. Too many parameters provided. Okay, and it's TypeScript. All right, so there might be some stuff in here you could play around with for sure. So Lighthouse will load that page, and this is Google's kind of SEO sort of thing. If I were to expose this to the public and make a real app out of it, I'd want to start at least looking at these kind of metrics. This is assuming the page loads. Like what I'm looking for a lot of times is, hey, does the page load? And between versions, have I made it slower? Does it actually work if I change a single line of code? Does it still load? Those are the issues that I have when developing something like this, a silly front end. I think as you're going towards into something that you're going to use in prod, you probably want to start paying attention to these metrics, the performance of the app, the best practices. But basically, looking at this, it looks like the first contentful paint is pretty slow. So that's when it started to load the page itself. How long did it take to load? The largest, in terms of what is the largest area it loaded, which I think were those text boxes, took 12 seconds, which is not great. And then the speed index itself, just on total time, was about 5.4. This is without even sending something off. So as part of the HuggingFace is very popular and a lot of people are using this kind of stuff. So it's slow as a result. But it might be interesting to compare and contrast this hosted in different regions or different zones or like internally versus externally. There's a bunch of stuff we could do here in terms of metrics to ensure that like you're maybe deploying to an area where your users are or get the best experience. I guess those kind of metrics are interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So
Another player in the space definitely makes life easier, I can see, for experimenting with some different ideas. So if I was to come to you, and I already know the answer, it depends.
Fair enough.
But if I was to come to you and say, why do I need Gradio? Why would I use Gradio? What's your response to that?
Yeah, I guess the first question would be like, how comfortable are you with front ends? I think the use case I saw online is, hey, as an API developer, does your PM often get confused about the features you're delivering? What if you could slap a front end on it that would show them what it's doing without necessarily diving into the terminal? For me, it's like backend devs who need a quick front end that doesn't need to be all singing, all dancing.
Yeah, and I think quick front end is the part there. This isn't something that you're going to build a whole app on. Just is to get something off the ground, an MVP. But beyond that, it doesn't seem like it's going to change the world.
No, yeah, and there are components like you could build an app around this, but again, it's probably going to have that same look and feel. So getting outside of this look and feel might be tough. And the other is like it's got some components, but it doesn't have the components that you'd expect from some of the other frameworks. I looked at another one called Streamlit, which I think is from Snowflake, for example, which is similar, but their goal is to show you data really quickly or show you widgets to allow you to pivot your spreadsheet, or if you want to look at freezing a row or freezing a column, or maybe excluding things from a graph to see what would happen. That kind of thing seems to be what Streamlit's curious about or trying to solve for. What's interesting to me is that they both are intersecting at this point where it's load an LLM model and visualize, which seems to be a goal that they both have, as well as they've gone into that rapid application development space, and they both have pros and cons on their end as well. LLMs, we've got data, we've got gobs of assumptions about how these things may react with the GUI in front of them. A lot of times what we're trying to do is figure out, is this an app? What can I do to quickly cobble something together to have other people play around with it?
I think this has been a great first pick for a new tool in our little AI lab experiments and related tools. As we mentioned earlier, I've got this list. Top of my list is Cursor. And I started to install it earlier, and Ryan excitedly pointed out that some of the most fun parts of discovery with this app is like the questions it asks you at the beginning.
Yeah, that onboarding experience to me is interesting in these tools.
Yeah, so we will include that in the process. I don't know if the same wizard will pop up when I open it up again next time, but
I just want to know about how much you love Emacs. That's all.
I really don't have an opinion on Emacs. I think I've probably used it less than 5 times ever, and it was fine. But like you, I enjoy the experience of Vim, the text world. And when I'm not in there, it's VS Code usually. But now we got Cursor and some other stuff out there, so that's what we're going to play with.
Absolutely.
Next time for me, I think that's probably a good place to stop this recording, and we'll share it amongst our group, get some feedback, and see what we can do to help y'all understand this stuff moving forward. Make sure we're helping each other advance our understanding, and like I said earlier, keep tabs on each other and protect each other a little bit.
Keeping safety in mind. Yeah.
I think it's just something that's on top of my mind. I think the more we know about these things and how they're here to stay. So people are putting these things into our stacks, integrating them into our applications, which means the part of day-to-day life for all of us in some ways. And I think it's naive to just ignore them and say that's somebody else's problem. It's all part of the same thing. So it's good for us all to just have an understanding of these tools, what's out there, why would you use them, are they helpful? And that's what we're here to do, is share what we find out in that effort.
Super excited to see you see Cursor.
I'm excited to play with it. So we'll do that for the next one, and we'll see you all then.
Bye, folks.
See ya.